Welcome back to Open Up. I'm Tina Miller.
And I'm Don Clark, your favorite pair on the air, and we're so privileged to have with us Dolores Huerta, one of the great Americans of our time, and her daughter, Juana Chavez. We're so glad to have you. Dolores, take us back. I remember watching Edward R. Murrow, the great journalist, and his great classic documentary called Harvest of Shame, deploring and describing the conditions in which our farm workers produced our food for this nation. Tell us the before and after of this struggle.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because I was actually involved in that documentary. I was working in Stockton, California. That's where I grew up before I came to Delano. And the Latino farm workers that are in that documentary, I organized them for them to be able to interview them and to film them. It would be wonderful to say that everything is A-OK for farm workers, but we know that it isn't in California because of the strike and the boycott and the sacrifice of our martyrs, 5 people that were killed in that struggle. Farm workers do in California and throughout the United States, it's a law now that they have to have toilets for the workers and they have to have cold drinking water. Workers are protected under the minimum wage laws, under safety standards, and that is all over the country. I mean, all throughout the United States. And this even applies to undocumented workers. If an undocumented worker is not paid a minimum wage, they can file a complaint. Unfortunately, many of them don't know that. Again, they have the right to organize in California. We have unemployment insurance for farm workers in California. And interesting that the so-called great Ronald Reagan vetoed unemployment insurance after it passed the legislature 3 times in a row, and so that it wouldn't go into law. So it wasn't until after Jerry Brown got elected the first time that we were able to get unemployment insurance for farm workers. We have disability insurance for farm workers in California. And of course, the right to organize, the Agricultural Labor Relations Act, which allows farm workers to come together to petition, to have a secret ballot election and vote for a union. But in the other states throughout the United States, farm workers don't have those protections. And in fact, except for the toilets and the cold drinking water and the safety standards and minimum wage, workers, say in Florida or even in New Mexico, they don't have these protections of unemployment insurance. They don't have that. Disability insurance, they don't have that. In fact, I was with Carrie Kennedy, Robert Kennedy's daughter, in New York, and they are still trying to get protections for farm workers that we've had close to 40 years now. Just again, 1 day of rest a week, unemployment insurance, they don't have that. And unfortunately, because of the way that the laws are structured, you almost have to say it's got to go state by state. I don't know if there's any way that on the federal level that they can make that happen for farm workers.
I was seeing a documentary where the crops that you have to bend over to pick, if someone would stand up just to stretch and ease their back, just standing up is a signal they're not working and they could be punished. Is that true?
That's true. And one of the great things, too, that I'm glad you mentioned that we were able to get rid of what they call a short-handled hoe so that farm workers could actually cut the weeds with a long-handled hoe. They didn't have to bend over like that. That was just another way of denigrating workers to make them feel like they're less human. Unfortunately, we still have some crops like the strawberries that we know that workers still have to bend over. But they do have to give them a relief period and a rest period. And they just can't fire them because they stand up.
Boy, growing up in Oregon, they used to send us out in the fields as school children and pick strawberries, and that is hard work. I remember even as an agile boy being exhausted.
Oh. Let me ask Dolores, you mentioned New York. You were just with Carrie Kennedy. So you still travel.
Oh, yes.
And tell us about that.
Well, I do a lot of public speaking. I was just recently in Washington, D.C., and I'm going to do a little bragging here, that I am the first person of Hispanic heritage that now has a portrait exhibit in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C.
Oh, really?
And that opened on July the 10th, I believe, just last month, and it was wonderful. And so I was there in Washington. Then I go back to Washington. I'll be going, they're going to have another event on the Portrait Gallery on the 24th of September. And then I'm on several boards. I'm on the Board of People for the American Way. This is the organization that Norman Lear started. Norman Lear, All in the Family. And they fight kind of the extremists in our political system, and they kind of monitor them and see what they do, see what they say, and then bring that out to the public. And then I'm on the board of Equality California, which is a board that fights for the rights of gay, lesbian, and transgender people, bisexual people. And on the board of the Feminist Majority. And I've been on that board since it first started over 25 years ago. And there we fight for women's reproductive rights and also for gender balance so that we can have more women that are more feminists elected to public office. So because of this, and then I go back for different things. For the White House, I'm invited periodically when they have special seminars on different issues.
What was it like to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom?
Well, it was a big thrill, and the reason I felt so wonderful about that is because they really honored the community organizing. You know, President Obama was a community organizer, and he was ridiculed for that. I remember that, he's just a community organizer, but makes him think he can be president. And so that was to me it was a recognition that organizing at the community level is a very important part of our democracy. Yes. And also, when Bob Dylan was there, when I got the award, Bob Dylan got the award. Toni Morrison was the other recipient, and also the woman Juliet Lowe, who started the Girl Scouts of America. And I was a Girl Scout as a young kid for 10 years, from the time I was 8 to the time I was 18 years old. So the Girl Scouts have always been a very big part of my life.
Wow. Started early and still going strong.
Juana, do you get to travel on these events and be with her?
Fortunately, I do. On occasion, I get to travel with her. But I am one of the few people that I know. It's a little different now that I actually work for the foundation. I have a better idea of her schedule. But before, people would say, well, where's your mother now? I have no idea. Well, you know what state she's in? I really couldn't tell you. And people thought that was so odd. Like, how can you not know what state your mother is in? Like, trust me, you don't know my mother.
Dolores, you are still controversial. I mean, I remember you came to speak to one of our civic groups here in Bakersfield, your hometown, and prophet is not without honor in his own town or without. But anyway, it wasn't well received. I mean, the murmurs I heard in the crowd was, well, she is just too radical. I mean.
Yeah, and I think, I was actually, just got back from New Mexico. I was spent 3 days in New Mexico this last weekend, and I was there with Valerie. Remember the woman, Joe Wilson, the people. Remember she was outed by the Cheney people up in Washington because she was worked for the CIA, and then they outed her, and it really had bad repercussions. So I think that we have a lot of ignorance in our society. I mean, when we think of the racism that goes on and the ramifications of racism, it's because people are just ignorant. They don't realize that number. And I love to say this when I make speeches, especially at colleges and high schools, and I remind people, we only have one human race. We only have one human race. We don't have a bunch of different, we have a lot of ethnic groups, we have a lot of different cultures, nationalities, one human race. And where did our human race begin? And I ask the audience, okay? Yeah. We are Homo sapiens, one human race. Where did our race begin? It began in Africa. That means that we are all Africans of different shades and colors. And it is interesting to see the reactions of the crowd. Because, we believe in science, right? And I mean, this is scientific. And I had my own DNA done. I had my own DNA done, and they asked me, it was some TV station in Los Angeles. And they asked me, well, what do you think you are? I said, well, on my mother's side, my parents are European. On my dad's side, they came from Mexico, right? My grandparents came from Mexico on my dad's side. And so they said, I think I'm about 60-40. When they brought my back DNA, I was 65 European and the other 30% indigenous, And it was interesting going all the way back to Peru. And then I said to them, well, how did my Africanness show up? And it did. Wow. 0.003. And then they said, but guess what? You also have 0.005 Neanderthal, which is only European.
Oh, wow.
That was kind of interesting, So I think if everybody would have their DNA, then they would say, we got to get rid of this racist stuff because you know what? I've got some Africanness in me, too.
Juana, I'd like to know from you, what do you think the legacy of your mother will be in your family and in the community and in this world? I mean, are you kids taking up the banner and marching forward, carrying it forward?
Well, certainly that was something that was instilled in us since, the time that we could process information, I was walking picket lines as soon as I could walk. So I was, my playtime. My mom has a story where I'm playing with my play telephone. She said, "Oh, are you calling the, I don't know. She can tell the story."
We had
right?
done a training, and we were in New York City on the Great Boycott. Juanita was 3 years old at the time. And when we got back to our boycott house in New York, Juanita's on her phone. I said, "What are you doing, Juanita?" She said, "I'm calling the people." "Oh," I said, "are you calling them to come and picket?" "Oh, no," she said, "they're not ready to picket. They're just going to leaflet."
So
But she picked up on that. But my kids are all very. Juanita has been a teacher for 14 years, and she left her teaching job just like I left my teaching job to become an organizer. She just left her teaching job a couple of years ago to come and help us with our social media work here with the foundation. And my oldest son, Fidel Huerta, who is here, he's a family practice doctor, worked with the Kern Medical. He's now working with the Kern Regional Center with children of special needs. My other son, Emilio, is an attorney, and he's also a public interest attorney. He works with nonprofit organizations, So my kids all have a very strong sense of social conscience.
And
Excellent.
I think that our influence, affects our friends and other people in the community. And I think that the legacy for us and for everyone who knows my mother, she inspires.
Yes.
You're not going to feel right with yourself if you're just sitting around on your bum doing nothing. If you
There's the
want to
answer.
honor her legacy, you'll know that service to others is the way to live your life.
Absolutely. And we have her contact information on the screen, Dolores Huerta Foundation. That's right here in Bakersfield. Telephone number 661-322-3033. And of course, the website is doloreshuerta.org. So
And our executive director is my daughter, Camila Chavez. We have to mention her because
All
she
right.
does all the heavy lifting.
excellent. Thank you so very much for being with us today.
Oh, what an honor. A great American and
Woo.
a global citizen in every sense of the word.
Yes,
You bet.
Don, absolutely. So when we come back, a lot more community work to talk about.
Bet.